just you so far.
Okay, it is 11 o'clock, and so I will call the...
You gotta turn your mic.
It is 11 o'clock, so I will call the March work session to order. And thank you all for being here, and thank those that are joining us virtually. It's a beautiful day. And I'll ask the clerk if he would kindly call the roll.
Mrs. Amos?
Here.
Mr. Cole?
Here.
Mr. Dwyer?
Here.
Mr. Hunter?
Here.
Mr. Perry? Mr. Reed?
Here.
Mr. Vincent?
Here.
And for those of you who are watching, you will notice that we have a new system starting today. Hopefully you can see and hear much better than in the past. And you'll have to give us a little time to figure out what we're doing and how we use this new system. But I think it will be great for the public. I've received many concerns about being able to hear everyone, particularly wearing masks, and I think that this new system will definitely help with that. I would also like to thank my colleagues, and particularly Vice Mayor Reed, for taking over for me at the February council meeting on such short notice. And I would like to thank each of you all for the many acts of kindness that I have received over the last few weeks due to the passing of my mom. It is much appreciated. With that, we will move to our agenda. And Mr. Davis, I'm going to flip it just a little bit and start with item, we've done 1 and 2, and start with item 4, the discussion of the fiscal year 21-22 health insurance rates.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Maybe I should put mine on. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I want to, you already have the information about there is a slight increase in the health insurance. The Finance Committee met on the 25th. We discussed those. You have in your packet information about if we stayed with currently how it is, what that increase looks like shared by the employee and the town on the new rates. However, it came to my attention at that meeting that years back, it was supposed to be calculated a little differently to where it was the intent of that committee and the council, is my understanding of that time, that whatever the family 500 the town would pay, that's the portion that the town would pay towards the family of the 250 plan. And same for dual. If whatever they paid for the 500, they would pay for the 250 dual, same for single. There was some discussion at that committee meeting about other methods potentially, and I don't want to put Mr. Cole on the spot, but I would say that as the chairman of the Finance Committee, if you want to summarize some other aspects of that committee meeting, or you want to add some explanation to some of these that actually you assisted in from those discussions in that committee meeting about the rates. I can hit some of the highlights. The only one is I might need a little help on is the blended rates. But if you go to the 250 one, that's titled 250 plan, same as the 500 plan. That's the one that I was describing to you a minute ago, that when we went to the 500, it was the intention of the committee and the council at that time that the 500 would have rates, and then whatever the town paid for those 500 rates would be to the 250, and anything above that would be the employee's contribution. The other is the employee absorbing 100% increase and increasing the premium of the 500 plan. And that will just show that the percentage changes on the 500 so that that increase for this year, that the town does not take on that increase, but the employee would take on that increase. Mr. Cole, if I have messed anything of that up from the discussion or the paperwork, please let me know, or any of the committee members, and the blended rates, if you don't mind.
If you look at the 250 rate, that is, if we simply just make the town share equal on both plans of what we're paying for both the 500 and 250, you'll see with that at the bottom of that pay is that the employees' increase for the 250 would be $25.81 for a single per payday, $48.68 for the dual, and $71.59 per pay, which are pretty big increases. So this is what it would take to get it back to what the council's intent was several years ago of the town only paying a certain portion of it and the employee picking up, or basically purchasing up better health insurance by going to the 250. And then keeping the same rates for the 500. You see the 500, currently we pay 100% of the individual rate, so there's zero increase. $4.83 for the dual and $6.89 for the family plan increase based upon this computation. And all this computation does is basically put the town share at the same amount for both plans. The second rate shows that what if we had the employee absorb 100% of whatever increase we're seeing in the premium from this year until 2021, 2022. So this would be the maximum that an employee would possibly pay on that last plan. And you can see there, again, the town share stays the same, but the people in the 500 plan have a larger increase, and then the ones on the 250 not only have the increase from us changing the town share, but also have the increase of the increased premium. So if you look on the second page is a blended rate, and I think what we'll have to do with this, if we want to get back to the original intent of the town paying a fixed rate for the insurance and the employee paying for the difference for the purchase up, we would have to create some type of a phase-in period. And all I did on this one for the blended rates was assuming that those in the 250 plan, their only increase would be the difference of what the town was paying and supplementing versus, so it's, the town share would be the same. And then the increase of cost for those in the 500 would be assuming if the employee absorbed 100% of the increased premium from this year. And you'll see there that on page 1, or I guess it's page 2, that says blended rate. The employee increase for the 250 is $25.81, $48.68, $71.59, the same as it was if we changed the share, and then absorbing the increase just on the 500 plan, it'd be $12.33 for the individual, $27.48 and $39.27. Still some large increases. So this is just simply, here's the worst case scenario, and as council, what we need to take a look at is how do we want to get the employee share back to the intent of what it was a few years ago without causing too much of a financial burden on the staff.
Thank you.
I hope that explained it.
And I would just add, we also looked at, because the other versions I had shared with you, I think at the last work session, before we had the new rates, we talked about savings or increases. So if you did nothing and left it the same, you're going to have a $49,000 and some dollar increase. the blended saves, and this is based on the original, if you left it with the new rates, that's what it's based on. You would save almost $107,000. If you did the 250 plan share as the 500, which if you ask for my suggestion, it would be this one. And that would just start now in essence of what the intent was a few years ago. The total savings is about $104,600. And then the last one of the 500 and increasing that absorption is a savings of $160,000. But I think that puts more. That's going to increase the expense on both sides, not the town, but the employee. Oh, I'm sorry. I need, I mean, it doesn't have to be a decision today. It can be next week, but I need it well, it has to be this month because you don't meet other than today and next week, because we have to let Anthem know what our plan choices are, and they also have to know the distribution of the amounts, because Anthem does have some requirements, which all of these meet their requirements, but they need to know the percentages that we're paying and the employees paying.
So at the very latest, council needs to make a decision by next week's council. Are there any discussion, any questions? I think we probably need to absorb all the information and work through it and be prepared to make a decision next week. But any questions today of Scott or any member of the Finance Committee who have worked on this? Scott, any additional information you think council needs to know?
No, sir.
Okay. With no questions, then we'll plan to make a decision next week, and we'll move to the next item. Stephen, if you will kindly give council that handout. And while he's doing that, we talked a little bit in December about the accomplishments of 2020. While 2020 was an extremely challenging year, and I guess probably a year ago this month, we started in the midst of COVID. But for the town, things did not stop, and 2020 was a very busy year. We hired a new town manager. We adopted a new comp plan. We established procurement policies. We said goodbye to one council member and welcomed a new one. We contracted out our human resources services, are part of it. We hired a new town clerk. We completed finally the Millwood and Maine project after how many years, Mr. Town Manager? We finally adopted a resolution to move forward with the roundabout at Okai and Griffin. We completed the airport runway project. We completed implementing a new financial system. We did a $10,000 grant to the IDA for small businesses. And we ordered, and as of today, have implemented new video equipment for council chambers, which I think we realized really early on that this was going to be not only the now, but the future. And so I think we made a really wise decision to go ahead and purchase the equipment that we're using as of today. And we bought the flags for Main Street. And last, but certainly not least on my list, was the Barbara Rose Johns being selected to go into the U.S. Capitol. So while we think that 2020 was a tough year, the town accomplished a lot. And what we'd like to spend a few minutes today is talking about the roadmap for 2021. The town manager and I have had several discussions and have just sort of come up with a rough list of priorities for council's consideration and to kind of talk through today and be sure that we're all on the same page, and this is what we want to accomplish during 2021. And the first thing, several of these things come from our retreat, which was last June, I believe.
June of
Yeah,
20.
in the midst of last year, we also had a retreat. And so some of these things come from the retreat. The first on the list is to rewrite the town charter. And as we kind of work through these, Scott, if you'll just comment on what that involves so everybody kind of understands what the charter rework entails.
Yes, sir. The charter, as with many charters, is relatively old in nature, and some of it has been already changed because of state law, and some of it just needs a little bit of more clarification in it, and how some of the changes, such as, one of them is we no longer have to approve the bills. I mean, there's no point in that if you adopt a budget for those expenditures. So there's changes like that need to be made more updated to how you want to function now in a council manager form of government. It's not distinctively clear. I think y'all heard that from when you were searching for a town manager, that's how you function, but it doesn't specifically say that in detail. And so those types of changes, we can, as Kim Payne, who led the retreat, mentioned to you all, we can do the work and drafting it in-house. We would have an attorney, and he recommended one that deals in local government. And that attorney, that firm could also represent you in the General Assembly to be the lobbyist as well to make sure that the path that it goes through in the Senate and the House simultaneously is what I would recommend. You get a senator and a delegate to put that into a bill simultaneously, and it go through on both sides in case there's any hiccups on either side, which I don't think there would be. And then that person would follow that and track it for you and represent you. At times, you may have to have the mayor or the mayor and vice mayor, whomever, go and to a committee meeting if it's live. I mean, if it's in person, then who knows? And so that process would take place. The goal would be in the 22 General Assembly session. Usually you have to have them the information sometime in November or a little bit prior to that in order for them to put those bills in for it to begin in January.
As we work through these or kind of go through this list, if anyone has concerns or thinks that, we should be on a different path, please say so. But this is just a list that we put together of goals for 2021 for council's consideration. And there was a lot of discussion in the retreat about redoing the charter. And I think that with the new clerk on board, he can help do some of the research. And I think that we clearly could have something ready for this fall, for November, December, and it would be in next year's General Assembly session to do that. Anybody have any questions or concerns about that? I think everybody up here had expressed concerns about rewriting the charter. The second thing on the list is to research and create either an airport authority or airport commission for the Farmville Regional Airport. That also requires General Assembly approval. And Mr. Davis, you want to kind of touch the highlights of that one as well. And you might want to talk about our trip to South Hill and what we learned there.
Yeah, prior to COVID, the mayor and I made a trip to South Hill, talked to their town manager about various topics. And one of the things that we went on the trip for was also to look at, they have a commission, an airport commission for Brunswick-Mecklenburg Airport. It's a general aviation airport just like us. However, they have representatives on a commission, and I can't give you the exact number of how many from each jurisdiction, but it's Brunswick, Mecklenburg, the town of South Hill, and two smaller towns that I regretfully forget exactly who they are, but they're smaller than us. In that commission, they actually run the operation. Well, they actually, determine for the airport how it's run. But they also share the cost of that airport. I believe, if I have the numbers correctly, don't hold me to these, it's around the $50,000 mark per year for Brunswick and Mecklenburg. I think South Hill is $25,000. I don't think it's $50,000. And then the two smaller towns, based on their budgets, is anywhere, I think, between $1,000 and $2,000 contribution. But on top of that, the commission has to determine how they're going to make revenue in operating the airport. And so, as far as hangar spaces, gas, and some of the other things that they do out there, that would take the burden off of currently the town of Farmville, where our airport is located in Cumberland County, and we receive 0 tax dollars from that airport. We get a lot of grants, don't get me wrong, from the FAA and the State Department of Aviation that help us do a lot of the, with very little or minimum match, in order to do a lot of the large capital improvement projects. But the day-to-day operation of it, the gas that we make, the money we make off of gas and those types of things, if you remember, we don't own the hangars. We only have a land lease. So there's some other things that that we're funding that through town operations at a considerable more amount than the $50,000 to $25,000 a year. And as I said, we'd look for interest potentially in other counties, one being Cumberland, since it's in Cumberland, Prince Edward County, maybe even Buckingham County, and potentially higher education institutions that are around us if they have an interest in being part of that commission. One, you have a say in how it's operated, and two, it's a funding source that you have a say in what your funds are going towards. So whether it's a commission or an authority, there are two different options. I need to look into the commission a little bit more. I know the authority definitely would have to be approved by the General Assembly. In essence, they make they allow for an authority to be formed.
The airport is clearly an asset to the community, no question about that. But the town of Farmville is solely funding it, and it is an expense. It's a great expense. So by going to an authority or a commission, hopefully we would have some partners that would help in the long-term sustainability of the airport. And I clearly think that Hampton-Sydney and Longwood, both of those institutions, use the airport, and I think they would certainly consider being part of an authority or a commission. And so I think there could clearly be 5 members, Prince Edward, Cumberland, Buckingham, town of Farmville, actually 6 in the two institutions of higher learning. So we could have 6 members of a commission. And we talked a great deal when we were in South Hill about how it worked, and it works well for them. It works well for them. And it's a long-term goal, but I clearly think it's something that we can work toward here to help the airport from being such a financial liability for the town.
And if this stays a goal of all of council, my first move would be is to get those stakeholders that would be involved in that. So my counterparts at the local level, and then reach out to the higher education institutions to see who they would want to be at the table for that discussion. It may be a short discussion, that there might not be anybody interested, or there may be interest, but I think that's where it's got to start.
And we had a brief discussion with the new county administrator yesterday, and he has some experience with airport commission right? Mr. Davis, in the county he came from, they had an airport and an airport commission. So he certainly can offer some experience with that from his previous job. Next thing on the list is continue the partnership with Retail Strategies, and actually, I believe at the last council meeting that I was not here, council approved signing the contract with Retail Strategies. And let me just add a little side personal note there. If you all remember when they were making the presentation and we were looking at a list, and I jokingly said, hey, we'll take a Publix and we'll take this and this and this. And then the paper wrote their article and I began getting texts, when are we going to get this? You know, it was kind of in jest, you know, hey, yeah, we'll take this, this, and this. But the paper took off on it in a completely different route. And so I don't anticipate those coming next week, next month, next year, but it's a nice dream. You would think after all these years I would learn not to say things in jest that way, but you know, it is what it is. The next thing is a new website, which is definitely something we need, and I think you have some ideas on that.
I do. There's several vendors that specifically deal with local government, I mean, throughout the United States. And I believe that we would have the opportunity to hone in on one of those that is a leader in local government websites and could do a cooperative agreement clause from another contract and have that pretty readily available once we get the funding July 1 to move forward in implementing that.
The next item is to continue to improve the town-county relationship, and I will say kudos to Scott and Doug. I know they've done a couple of virtual events, and I told them yesterday when they were speaking to the Lions, it got kind of comical. One would say, I 100% agree with Scott. I 100% agree with Doug. And they went back and forth like that several times, and I went, oh, this love fest won't last. But, you know, it is great to see them, and Scott, Doug, and I have had lunch together, and I think that, I think it's the beginnings of a great relationship, and it's certainly very different from in the past. And the new county administrator brings a lot of experience in a lot of different areas to the table, and he clearly sees us working hand in glove together. You might want to comment on a couple of other projects I know you all have worked on.
We one project right now is the Vaccinate Prince Edward. They came up with a tagline. They put together a group so that we could begin vaccinating more of the vulnerable and people in the 1A and 1B, specifically 1B. And they were, put a group of stakeholders from the community together, and, they were leading that charge, and I saw no point in trying to replicate that. So on our website, I was part of the group with them, and we've shared their webpage. They now have a Facebook page. We've been, if they call over and say, hey, we're putting this out, can you share this on y'all's, so that their Facebook page becomes more prevalent, known. And since ours has been around a while, and so we've done that. During the winter weather events, Doug and I were in constant communication about roads and openings, and when power was lost, about they assisted in when Mercy Chefs donated the food. And so I would just say that there's a lot of things that we've begun working on, and I think that will continue.
Good job. The next item on the list, again, is pretty much lifted from the retreat, and that's the town manager to increase and develop community relationships. Obviously, COVID and the pandemic has prevented a lot of meetings, but Scott is aware of that goal of council and him becoming more ingrained in the community and more involved in various projects and meeting with various groups. And as COVID begins to subside, Scott will be more out there and more involved.
And even with, I would just say, even with the pandemic, I mean, as I said, there's a group of stakeholders that got together to talk about how we put out information for vaccinations. It's from religious organizations to business owners to Piedmont Senior Resources to local governments, the Virginia Department of Health. So I mean, that in itself has made a reach in some ways, even during the pandemic, of people working together.
The next item is the creation of the employee policies and procedures, and we're actually in the process of that. A couple of council meetings ago, we retained the services of the Berkeley Group to assist with that. And do you have a timeline?
The timeline is hopefully before the end of the fiscal year, June 30. They're actively working on it. Some of that is, it needed changes from a legal standpoint, as HR laws change, how we actually function to actually how it said we would function. I mean, those things need to say what you're actually doing, not a policy and you're not actually following that policy. So, and there's some things that needed to be added that were missing. And so that's being taken care of.
The next item is continue the Wayfinding signage program, and I believe we have, I referred that to the Infrastructure Committee, and I think they're well on their way with that.
Yes, sir. The council approved last meeting to support the 2-to-1 funding if we got the grant from through to that Farmville Downtown Partnership will put in, and so that would be just a beginning stage of, I think, probably a few phases of getting all of those wayfinding signages in place. But there is a need, and we know that it's a matter of how we get it implemented in phases, I believe would be the best case scenario for us.
Thank you. The next is a list of potential vacant positions. A couple of them are actually new positions that need to be filled, and I would yield to the town manager to talk about priority. I think he has a specific order. He would love to see that. Again, it's all budget related. And
if you remember, not long after I was appointed February the 21st, so it's been a year, y'all officially, thank you for hiring me. I brought to you a plan of, or an organizational structure that I changed of how the town would operationally be structured. And you all approved that. And in that, we talked about positions. The only new position, new as in brand new, is a finance director position / treasurer. Because the charter still says we'll have a treasurer. That's one thing that could change. But until then, it would be a finance director / treasurer. We are in need of a finance director. That's probably the most immediate need. The next is a director of community development. We've been without anybody in planning other than me filling in when I was an assistant town manager, and I'm still filling in that position. As it needs a person that is consistently doing it. If you remember, when Cindy retired, we were able to get the Berkeley Group to help with the comprehensive plan, the zoning rewrite, all of those things. So we froze the position in order to cover the expense of that. Well, at this point in the change of the organizational, we now need somebody to implement those things. Somebody's got to focus on those topics and implement that comprehensive plan. And it also needs leadership on that side of the office for employees on a daily basis. So we're really taking a town planner position, as I said, in the organizational change, and resonating that into person that has the ability to not only be in planning and zoning, but also to be a manager of employees. The next one that I would say is right in line is we've had the conversation of instead of a volunteer fire chief, because I appoint whoever the volunteers, well, not whomever, they usually make a recommendation, but the manager can appoint the fire chief, whether it's that person or not. And it's a volunteer position. I would say that I think 10 to 15 years from now, you're going to see a need, maybe shorter, of kind of like the Prince Edward Volunteer Rescue Squad. They were all volunteers one time, years ago, and they've moved to some paid positions and to volunteers. I think in rural Virginia has been some of the last ones to do this, and it's going to be hard because of budgets and constraints along the way. But I think as you see more populated areas, you're going to see the need for full-time positions along the way. And I think the first starting point is to get somebody to actually lead that from a full-time position, so a full-time fire chief position. That can lead the volunteers, still is responsible to the town manager, as is the volunteer fire chief, but that's their daily job. So we have a position that's open in the fire department that is since I think December of 19-ish, I believe it was, or January of 20. So that's not a new position, it's just going to be elevated to a different level position. And we've had that discussion in that organizational structure. The other position that I think is next is a director of recreation. Obviously, some of our recreational activities have not been able to be done because of the pandemic. But I do know that will change. So we do still have somebody in recreation that's leading that from a programs perspective and planning for what we can do activity-wise. Some of our recreational plans in the near future talk about trails, the splash pad potentially, and some of those other things. And that not only can it be done by a recreation director, but if you feel that director of community development, those are all things they would have to work together with anyway, those two individuals, in order to make some of those things happen. Also, in very limited conversation, the new county administrator and I have talked about some of his experiences where recreation, actually where he was in Warren County, was in the county, not in the town of Front Royal. That maybe this is something, we also talked in the retreat about being a joint venture of some type along the way in positions with the county, if you remember. There was a discussion about that at the retreat. What positions could we potentially do together? And I think this is one that we could benefit for both if that's a possibility. But he needs some more time with the board of supervisors. We need some more time to talk about how that would look and what it would be, if it can be. So those are the key list of individuals or positions that I would like to see.
Okay, and the last item on the list, and again, it's an open list, and there's no rhyme or reason to the list, obviously. There are various services that the town provides that we can evaluate for possible use with an outside vendor. And that's pretty broad, pretty generic, and I don't think we want to start identifying services now, but there are a lot out there that Scott can look at and bring to council for consideration. And that's all down the road as we continue to move to a 21st century town. Any comments or questions, anything on this list, anybody that concerns anybody? Do you think this is the direction we need to be traveling? We're interested in feedback.
Mayor, I think it obviously it tracks well with the retreat we had in last June and the things that were discussed there. I will say I took the county administrator up on his invitation to meet via Zoom when he was here and visited us last meeting, and had a great conversation and expressed my appreciation to some of these points for the relationship that he and Scott have begun to form and build there. And I think that was one of those points that came out of our retreat as well, was the importance of that town-county relationship and building it up and recognizing that's what's good for the town is good for the county and vice versa. And so that was a great thing to see. I would like to mention in reference to some of those partnerships and that COVID vaccine response that there is a vaccination clinic on Friday, and Farmville Cares, Patsy Watson, has been organizing some volunteers, and so there is an opportunity for folks to volunteer to help with some parking assistance with that vaccination effort. The vaccination effort is for folks who have already registered for vaccination, but there's an opportunity there to volunteer and help out the community, and I'd like to salute our community in general for the way that they've really come together during this time. It's been a year, and we continue to see people step up and really put their heart in it. That's all.
Any other comments, concerns about our direction for 2021? Everybody agree we're kind of on the right track, right path, going the right direction? Mr. Town Manager, any other questions that you want to raise along goals?
No, sir, not with goals.
Okay. The next item is comments by the town manager and staff.
I do have one other item. Mr. Hunter in Public Safety had asked me something in a Public Safety Committee meeting, and then the parliamentarian actually called me the following day, Mr. Ross, and said that the fire department, if you remember last year, it was their 150th anniversary, and they wanted to do a parade, and we were in the mix of the pandemic deep. They would like to still do a parade. They would not have the what's the word I'm looking for? The gathering afterwards at the sports arena or anything like that. They want to do just like the Christmas parade. I've got them to where they think it would work on Sunday, April 18th, so Sundays are not busy. They just want to come down. They want to have fire trucks from other jurisdictions. They give awards to those that they're going to judge, like I forget the different areas, but they would like to move and see if they could do it now that we're a little bit in a different scenario potentially with the pandemic. Anything you'd like to add, Ms. Thomas?
They've been working on it for the longest time, and it means a great deal to the fire department. 150 years, you just can't sneeze at. So if it's the way, I told them, and if it's the way for us to do it, I'm pretty sure we'll agree to do it. We just have to get together on the rest of the particulars.
I don't see any issues, Chief, other than the logistics for the police department. Will that be a problem?
It's like Christmas parade.
Okay. Do you need a motion?
I just need the majority to say that I can move forward with allowing that.
I'll put that in the form of a motion.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, so you can move forward with the 150th Fire Department Parade.
We're still working. I sent y'all some information on the assessments and the that had come out. Finance committee's talked about the assessments. Some of that might have included some new construction that we found out the last few days. So at the next meeting next week, we'll be needing to talk about that as an agenda item. To whether we have to schedule a public hearing or not, because that would take 30 days, and also from budget purposes.
So you anticipate the numbers you received, the initial numbers may change?
Potentially.
Okay. Anything else on your agenda?
No, sir.
Madam Treasurer, you have anything? Chief? Okay. If not, the next order is a closed session. And who has the notice?
I'm sorry.
Closed session notice.
I can, you want me to read it? Mr. Mayor, I move that the Farmville Town Council convene in closed meeting pursuant to the Code of Virginia in accordance with the provisions of paragraph A.1 of section 2.2-3711 for discussion of the performance of the Chief of Police.
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Don't need to go to the
Any
second.
opposed? And then I believe there's a second one.
I move that the Farmville Town Council convene in closed meeting pursuant to the Code of Virginia in accordance with the provisions of paragraph A.3 of section 2.2-3711 for discussion of the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. We will adjourn to the EOC in closed session.
I think you turned the volume up. Yeah.
I'll work on it. $6. Yeah, I'll work on this afternoon, I'll send it to you. And let you review it. All right, sounds good.
probably still running. Hey, it's probably still running.
Oh, he's actually got us back on, Scott.
I gotta get everybody back up here.
Okay. Because we gotta go back live again, right?
You might already be. Wait on Steve. Steve. We're ready.
Whereas the Farmville Town Council has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Farmville Town Council that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Farmville Town Council hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the Farmville Town Council.
Second.
Motion is second. Clerk, call roll.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Vincent?
Yes.
Mr. Dwyer?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mrs. Amos?
Yes.
Number 2, whereas the Farmville Town Council has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Farmville Town Council that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Farmville Town Council hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by Farmville Town Council.
Second.
Motion is second. Clerk.
Mr. Dwyer?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mrs. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Vincent?
Yes.
Mr. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Any other matters to come before council? Any other matters to come before council? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned.